Hello everybody and welcome to Notorious Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Notorious Cly and this is my Crusadia deck in Dueling Book because the cards haven't released in Duel Links yet. When they do release in Duel Links though, I plan on dropping some gems and getting the build you see in front of you. Maybe except for the very powerful, very expensive limited 3 back row cards. But this is definitely what I'll be running. Let's go ahead and go through the normal deck profile steps. We'll give you a brief overview of the archetype of the deck and what it wants to do and how it does it. Give you a card by card and then properly set our expectations so you don't hate me for selling you a load of hype. First up is our introduction. Crusadia is first and foremost an OTK deck. It is enabled by a very powerful boss monster in Crusadia Equimax. Crusadia Equimax is fantastic going second, but it still has some utility going first. And in Duel Links, I think its utility going first is just as good as its ability to go second and OTK your opponent. Crusadia Equimax gains attack equal to the combined original attack of all monsters it points to. Notice that Crusadia Equimax has an arrow that points up, as well as 2 diagonal down arrows, which means it will gain the attack of the monsters that you control that it points to, in addition to the attack of the monsters that your opponent controls that it points to. This means, at minimum, Crusadia Equimax will be doing 2,000 damage because its attack will always equal your opponent's monster's original attack plus 2,000. The OTK machine that is Crusadia Equimax is also enabled by Crusadia Maximus. Crusadia Maximus can target 1 Crusadia Link monster you control, and this turn when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, that battle damage is doubled. Remember when I said that Equimax is always going to inflict at least 2,000 damage to your opponent? Well, if you're able to get Crusadia Maximus on the field with Crusadia Equimax, you are now guaranteed to do minimum of 4,000 damage, enough for an OTK in Duel Links. Now that I've gone over the basic OTK enablers, some of you may be wondering, well, how easy is it actually to get to the OTK? And in my opinion, very easy. Crusadia excels at one thing, and that is link climbing, and specifically link climbing into their powerhouse in Crusadia Equimax. All the Crusadia main deck monsters have a common effect. You can special summon them from your hand to a zone that a link monster points to. It does not have to be your link monster, it can be your opponent's link monster. The constant ability to put bodies on board also helps enable Crusadia's powerful turn 1 play. The powerful turn 1 play is also enabled by Crusadia Equimax. Crusadia Equimax also has a second effect. Once per turn, at quick effect speed, you contribute 1 Crusadia or World Legacy monster that Crusadia Equimax points to, and negate the effect of 1 face-up card your opponent controls. This is a similar effect to Goki Master Ogre, which is part of a deck that was just heavily hit on the latest ban list. I would argue that Crusadia is better positioned to take advantage of Equimax's turn 1 effect than Goki was of Master Ogre's turn 1 effect, because Crusadia has an easier time getting materials on board. In addition to that, Equimax is only a link 3, so it requires 1 less material. And even more on top of that, with Crusadia's ability to spam bodies and find extra bodies to put on board, to set up the turn 1 with the extra body for the negate, all you need is 2 Crusadia cards with different names. Now you may be wondering, how consistent is it going to be to find at least 2 Crusadia cards so we can make Equimax? And I have good news for you. All we have to do is to go to a hypergeometric calculator and find out. This is a very basic version of a hypergeometric calculator. I couldn't find the one that I normally use. For whatever reason, I never added to my favorites. So this one will have to do. And you can see on screen right now that I have input some numbers to give us the probability of finding 2 Crusadia cards. Our population size is 20, because that's the number of cards we'll be playing in our total deck. The number of successes in our population, so the number of Crusadia cards, or ways to a Crusadia card, is going to be 13. Our sample size is 4, because that's how many cards are in a starting hand. And the number of successes in our sample needs to be 2, so 2 Crusadia cards. And our calculated probability of finding exactly 2 Crusadia cards is 33%. But if you look a little further at the data, our probability of finding at least 2 or more Crusadia cards in our opening hand is 89%. This only gets better when you go second. Now I'll punch in those numbers right now. As you can see, we have a population size of 20, number of successes is 13, the sample size is 5 because we're drawing a card for our turn, and we need 2 successes in the sample. Our probability of drawing at least 2 or more Crusadia cards has increased from 89 to 96%. A 96% chance of being able to get into Crusadia Equimax and OTK on turn 2 is incredible. An 89% chance of being able to make Crusadia Equimax on turn 1 is also incredible. Keep in mind that the optimal setup with Equimax on turn 1 involves having 2 different names. I'm sure I could find the advanced calculator and figure out the exact math for finding 2 different names, but math is boring and talking about Yu-Gi-Oh is fun, so we're going to continue talking about Yu-Gi-Oh for a bit. To close out our introduction, I would also like to say that Crusadia is very easy to learn how to play. This is a deck that I taught myself how to play from scratch in Master Duel after having no previous experience with the archetype. And if my dumbass can figure out how to play it, then all of you can figure out how to play it. The deck is one of those decks that is easy to learn but difficult to master. The deck doesn't do anything overly complicated, but the sequencing of your effects and the ability to maximize your simple lines of play through your opponent's board is where the real expression of skill comes through. In my opinion, it's similar to Resonators in that way. Resonators always takes the same path, but the way you order and sequence things along that path is often what determines success. That's enough of the introduction. Let's move on to the card by card. First and foremost, I would like to say that this deck is going to be moderately expensive. You are going to be required to do 3 run-throughs of the main box, no questions asked. You can try to make a free-to-play Crusadia version by only going through the main box twice, but you will be reducing the number of names available to you. And as we just proved with the hypergeometric calculator, we need a lot of numbers, need a lot of names, so we can have the highest chance of opening 2, and more specifically 2 of different names. Our first card is going to be Crusadia Draco. Crusadia Draco, like all Crusadia cards, can special summon itself from the hand to a zone that a link monster points to. Again, does not have to be your link monster, just has to be a zone that a link monster points to. If your opponent is kind enough to gift you a link arrow, take advantage of it. In addition to that, if Crusadia Draco is special summoned to a zone that a link monster points to, you can add 1 Crusadia card from your graveyard back to your hand. And that Crusadia card has to be a Crusadia card other than Crusadia Draco. You can't use Draco to add back Draco. Next up is Crusadia Maximus. We talked about Maximus a little bit earlier. It has the same shared effect as all the Crusadias, and its unique effect is that you can target 1 Crusadia link monster you control. This turn, when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, that battle damage is doubled. In addition to that, other monsters you control can also not attack, but that's hardly a restriction because Equimax has a similar effect that I didn't touch on earlier. We'll touch on it when we cover Equimax. Next up is Crusadia Reclusia. Crusadia Reclusia, same shared Crusadia effect, and its unique effect is if it is normal special summon to a zone that a link monster points to, you can target 1 Crusadia card you control and 1 card your opponent's controls, destroy them both. This is excellent spot removal, and I would like to give a big shout out to Nolan E. They commented on my YouTube channel and threw out the idea of using this in Salamangreat, and this is a fantastic card for salads. Reclusia is fire, can special summon itself to a zone that a link monster points to. Doing so can trigger Sunlight Wolf's effect, and it's a 1-for-1 spot removal that you get for free in salads. Fantastic card. If you're a Salamangreat player and you're a little bummed out about the latest nerf, try picking up Reclusia. For Crusadia, it is just as versatile and just as good. It's a Crusadia name, which means it does the thing you need, which is have 2 Crusadia different names. And having spot removal in engine is always fantastic, especially when it's searchable. We'll get to the searchable part later. Our next Crusadia card is Crusadia Arborea. Crusadia Arborea, if a Crusadia monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard or field to protect it from that destruction. It is worth mentioning now that Arborea is also a warrior and a level 3 tuner, which opens up some searchability and some other avenues of play. Next, I have 3 Mystical Space Typhoon here, but these could be any back row removal card you have. You are an OTK deck. You are going to want to clear back row and free the way for Equimax to do its thing. You can play Mystical Space Typhoon, Cosmic Cyclone, Spiritualism, even if you're a free-to-play player, or you could even run something like Forbidden Lance, but I'm not too hot on Forbidden Lance. We'll touch on that when I cover all the side deck options. Next, you'll see I have Count Pulse, Ice Dragon's Prison, and Crackdown. these are to represent the limit 3 spells and traps. Play the ones you have. It does not matter which ones you play. They are all limit 3 for a reason because they are all incredibly powerful. They all have different uses, and they are all good enough to win you the game. I personally like Crackdown because it's the only one I have. In addition to that, being able to steal your opponent's monster and use it to boost the attack of Equimax by bringing it to a zone that Equimax points to, or to be able to use it to link summon is fantastic for this deck. A lot of your link monsters in the extra deck are generic enough that you can find a way to link off your opponent's monster. Next card is Reinforcement of the Army. It searches Borea. This is what gets us our 13th name in the deck and increased searchability and more access to Crusadias. And lastly, I have Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is a hedge against opening only 2 of the same name. If you open 2 of the same name, Crusadia plus Monster Reborn, you still get the full Equimax plus pointing to a Crusadia monster setup. Let's touch on the extra deck monsters that I'm planning on playing, and then we'll move to the cards that I have in the side deck area there, which are cards that I considered playing but aren't going to make the list, at least initially. So our first extra deck monster is Crusadia Magius. I am playing 2 of Magius. Magius is fantastic for Crusadia. It is a link 1, which is inherently broken because they all turn any engine piece into something useful. Magius points down, which means it is very easy for you to trigger with your other Crusadias. When you trigger, you can add 1 Crusadia monster from your deck to your hand. This allows you to most notably search Draco, which then you will be able to continue your combo and have Draco recycle a Crusadia monster back to your hand. If you're curious about the combo, I'm definitely going to show you a test hand and show you how easy it is to get into Equimax and get this deck set up and rolling. Our next card is Crusadia Spatha. Spatha is really good, to be honest. I was a little worried about not seeing Regilex in the box leaks, but after reading Spatha, Spatha does everything you would want it to do. First and foremost, it's a link 2 that you can get into from Magius, and the Crusadia that you're going to be adding to your hand from your deck off of Magius effect. And on top of that, once per turn, if an effect monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, you can target 1 monster in either player's main monster zone, except for this card, move it to another main monster zone. This is fantastic for clearing the link arrow that Spatha has. So you can go Spatha, special summon a Crusadia to the arrow, Spatha effect, move that Crusadia that you just special summoned, freeing up another zone for you to get another Crusadia on board if you don't want to jump through hoops to get into a link 3 immediately. Or you can move one of your opponent's monsters in front of an available extra monster zone, which means Crusadia Equimax will eventually be pointing to it. Next up is Crusadia Equimax. We covered this a lot in the introduction, but never hurts to cover the signature card of this deck, and probably of this archetype. Crusadia Avermax is arguably the better card and more powerful, but Crusadia Equimax is what gives Crusadia its deck an identity. Crusadia Equimax gains attack equal to the combined original attack of all monsters this card points to. Original attack is important because if there are any debuffs or buffs going on, Equimax will ignore them and just take the original. In addition to that, Equimax has another continuous effect. Monsters this card points to cannot attack. Remember when we covered the Maximus lock of other monsters can attack? Not a big deal because Equimax is also locking you into only attacking with Equimax. And we covered its quick effect, but we'll cover it again just so you hear it and you become more familiar with it. Once per turn, quick effect, you contribute 1 Crusadia or World Legacy monster this card points to, then target 1 face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of the turn. This effect makes Crusadia fantastic going first. In the TCG, it notably struggles a little bit because of its turn 1, but where the power level is incredibly lower in Duel Links, a once per turn negate face-up card of any type, monster, spell, or trap, is crazy powerful. I covered it in the introduction. Master Ogre had the same effect. And Master Ogre is now part of a deck that was heavily hit on the ban list because of its ability to OTK and its ability to occasionally set up a very powerful turn 1 board in which it would be able to negate the effect of face-up cards your opponent's controlled. We are doing all of that here, and we are arguably doing that more consistently and easier. Now is a good time to mention that I'm running 2 of the Equimax, 2 of the Spatha, and 2 of the Magius. One for a turn 1 setup if I go first, and then a second one if my opponent manages to play through the Equimax setup that we have, so I can OTK on the follow-up. The last 2 extra deck slots here, you'll see Link Disciple and Nightmare Mermaid. You do not need to be playing both of these. I would highly recommend playing one of these because it is insurance against the Ibly lock. Now that decks have been hit on the ban list, they may be looking for other ways to remain competitive and remain relevant, and Ibly might be the way to do it. Now it's time to move on to the side deck, where it's filled with cards that I thought about playing but didn't make the initial cut. First up is Crusadia Revival. Crusadia Revival gives all Crusadia Link monsters you control 500 attack, and once per turn you can target one Crusadia Link monster you control. It can attack all monsters your opponent controls. This in theory is pretty good for being able to set up big Equimax OTK pushes where you won't be able to just push through one monster. But Crusadia Revival is not searchable because we don't have Regulex, and we don't have any way to search Field Spell. And I just think you can get more utility out of playing stuff like Compulse or Ice Dragon Prison or Crackdown or even Monster Reborn. Next up is Crusadia Crawler, and technically I lied for the last card. You can search it via Crusadia Crawler, but Crusadia Crawler is a trap card, which means it is going to be a very slow search, and by that time you could have made use out of one of your other tech slots. So you can feel free to call me a liar, but at least I gave you the correct information on the playability of Crusadia Revival. Next is another card that would be searchable by Crusadia Crawler, which is probably the only reason why Crusadia Crawler is being mentioned here. But I just think Monster Reborn does its job better, and it's World Legacy Succession. You can target one monster in your graveyard, special summon it to a zone a Link monster points to. This is just a searchable, albeit a very slowly searchable, Monster Reborn for your graveyard only. If you're not going to have constant access to World Legacy Succession, why not just play Monster Reborn instead and take advantage of anything that your opponent has in their graveyard as well. Next is Forbidden Chalice, always good. Monster Negation, great for playing into your opponent's board when you're going second. It's Forbidden Chalice, I don't think there's really too much more to talk about. It's a staple for a reason. Next up is Forbidden Lance. I'm not that big of a fan of Forbidden Lance because it decreases the attack of the monster that you're targeting. If your opponent is going to hold their one interaction for Equimax, you are not going to want to reduce Equimax's attack. You are going to want to be able to clear that back row before Equimax hits the field, or in all reality, before you even get started playing, so that you can play into an open board, play uninterrupted, play undisturbed. If your opponent is playing multiple back row, odds are the second back row will be chainable, and they will just chain it to Forbidden Lance and stop you where they need to stop you. I don't think you'd be wrong for playing Forbidden Lance. I just prefer to be proactive when it comes to back row than reactive. Next are Kaijus. So Dogoran and Raiden didn't make the cut because I don't think they're necessary in Duel Links. If Konami isn't going to cut the attack boost that Equimax gets or the ability for Maximus to double the battle damage, then you don't really need the Kaiju to go for the OTK. In a 40 card, 8,000 life point format, you normally play Kaijus, 1 for spot removal of problematic monsters your opponent controls, and 2, if you open multiple Kaijus, you can give your opponent 1, and then special summon 1 to a zone that Equimax points to, and boost Equimax's attack to help get you over that 8,000 life point threshold. We are dealing with half of the life points and still all of the attack boost and base stats. I don't think you're going to need the extra little boost. Playing Kaijus is never a bad option. 1-for-1 removal is very powerful in Duel Links, especially when it's unrespondable and it gets around all kinds of protection and floating effects. The same logic applies with Santa Claus as all the other Kaijus. If you're looking for 1-for-1 spot removal, I think you can get more out of different cards. In addition to that, we don't have control over if we go first or second, so we can't guarantee that we won't have a dead Kaiju in our hands when going first. I would rather play something with the upside of Compulse or Ice Dragon's Prison or Crackdown that I can always set when going first or going second and know it's going to be useful as soon as it's live. Last card that I have here on the side deck that I wanted to talk about was Top Logic Bomber Dragon. If you can find a way to make Bomber Dragon and still have Crusadias left in hand to special summon to the board that a Link monster points to, could be very cool to be able to clear the board. In addition to that, any Crusadia that you top deck and keep in your hand is just going to be able to special summon and keep board wiping with Top Logic Bomber Dragon. I don't think it's going to be that good, but it's something worth mentioning. Somebody may be able to figure out something that I've overlooked. And that's it for the card by card. I think we should go over expectations. I'm going to go out on a limb here. You guys normally know that I don't bullshit you. I try to be straight up, I try to be honest, and I try to give everything a fair assessment. With that being said, Crusadia is going to be tiered. It has a good turn 1, it has a good turn 2. It is consistent, it is accessible, it is able to take advantage of any toolbox monster you could think of if you can find a way to get it in there, and it can take advantage of all types of different back row. In addition to that, you're not locked into any one summoning mechanic. Anything you want to make, you can. In my box overview video, I mentioned that I would bet money that Crusadia would be tiered. If Crusadia is not tiered at least once by the end of next year, the first person who shows me that they're a subscriber will get like a $5 TCG player gift card or something. I'll put my money where my mouth is. Crusadia will be tiered. Consistent, good turn 1, good turn 2. I would not be surprised if this list has a lot of cards on the ban list in the near future. Now with that being said, let's go show you a basic combo and then... Okay, and we're here and you're watching the draw so you can see how consistent this is and that I'm not rigging the opening hand. And we're going to go ahead and put Aboria back to the top of the deck and then shuffle up because this is our 4 card starting hand. And we have found one Crusadia and a second Crusadia of a different name, plus reinforcements of the army, which means we get access to a third Crusadia. I'm going to show you the standard 2 Crusadia with a different name combo, and then we'll go from there. So it doesn't matter which one you use first, I'm just going to normal summon Maximus. I'm going to link Maximus off for Magius. Magius? I'm never going to pronounce his name right, please forgive me. So we are going to go ahead and use Reclusia to special summon in defense position. That is something I missed in the deck profile. All the Crusadia special summon themselves in defense position to a zone of link monster points too. It's a very minute detail, but it could be very important. So special summon Reclusia in defense. I'm not sure how these chain links are going to order themselves when they stack, but I'm going to just say Magus is going to activate first. So Magus effect will go first on the chain. We're not going to use Reclusia's effect because we don't want to trade one of our Crusadia monsters or anything. And we're going to search ourselves a Crusadia. We're going to grab Draco. This is the one you're always going to want to grab. Crusadia is the perfect extender for this deck. So now we are left to go into a Link 2. And our Link 2 of choice is Spatha. Spatha also has a down arrow. So we are going to go ahead and special summon in defense Crusadia Draco to Spatha. Now you could use Spatha's effect here to move Draco over and clear the zone, but there's really no need to. So we're just going to go ahead and trigger Draco's effect and recycle the Maximus back to our hand. It's important to mention as well that you can only special summon, it's worth mentioning that you can only special summon one Crusadia name per turn from the hand. So if we special summon Reclusia, we can't special summon Reclusia again. That is another detail I might have missed, but I'm sure all of you guys are reading your own cards, so you don't need me to tell you this. So now we have material for a Link 3, so we're going to send a Link 2 as a Link 2, and one monster for Crusadia Equimax, who requires 2 effect monsters including a Link monster. We have fulfilled its summoning requirement. Now we have a Link monster with a zone that it points to, and a name that we have not special summoned from our hand this turn. So we're going to special summon Maximus from our hand in defense position. This is all with 2 cards, 2 Crusadias with a different name. We now have Equimax live to negate the effect of a face-up card our opponent controls. In addition to that, we also have Crackdown and Reinforcement of the Army to grab Aboria if we needed to. But all I wanted to show you was the 2 cards, and that works with any 2 cards. Any 2 Crusadia names, as long as they're different names, will get you to this end board. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. I know I am excited for Crusadia to come to Duel Links so I can play it. I know I am not excited for Crusadia to come to Duel Links so I have to play against it. Either way, hopefully somebody's having fun. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, be safe, have fun.